What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Sun Belt Syndicate, the Hoops Edition, the Round Ball Roundup. We are trying to get you caught up on all the Sun Belt hoop action. Back with Zach. I like how that sounds, right? Back with Zach and ready to talk some hoops action. Before we do that, quick thanks to our sponsors, W Energy, Fanplex Graphics, TSN Off-Road, and as always, Dano Seasoning. I just used some tonight on some pasta to spice it up a little bit, so definitely grab you some of that. Zach, man, how you been?
Better. I mean, last time you did an episode, I wasn't feeling the best, so at least I'm good enough to be here.
Yeah, you sound better. Well, I guess I didn't really hear you, but I could just tell by the way you were writing back. I was like, yeah, he's keeping it short and sweet, and he definitely doesn't feel very good. So
yeah, I mean, I still have a cough here and there, but other than that, it's pretty much all gone.
Nice. Able to chill out on the couch and catch up on a lot of basketball, I'm sure, right?
Yep. I mean, I was doing that maybe even more when I was sick because I had nothing else to do. But
yeah, that makes sense. You took better notes and all that, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. Man, it's that time of year too, because just tonight I had a little Band-Aid need for the fingers because they're all splitting. How cold is it down there in Conway, South Carolina right now?
I got up to 50 today, but it was when I went to school this morning, it was in the mid-30s.
Okay. It's just a little bit colder here in the Triangle area of North Carolina, but probably not a huge difference, actually. I'm kind of surprised it was quite that cold down there. I think we didn't quite touch 50 today. I think I saw 48 or something like that.
Yeah, I think I got 49, 50 here.
Yeah.
Is the highest I saw it get.
Okay. Interesting. Well, I think we all have another cold front coming through here soon. I think Wednesday maybe or something. We'll have to see what happens. I know the wife and kid had a 2-hour delay today, but there was no weather. It was just for the cold and I guess icy patches. Was there actually an accumulation of anything down there?
I know one morning, I think it was the first morning I got back here. I think it snowed in Conway, but it was gone the next morning. But when I was up in Indy, it snowed. We got a foot of snow.
Jeez. People know how to handle it up there, though. There's a little difference, right?
Yeah, for sure. It was a foot of snow and ice everywhere. It's just a 2-hour delay. It's that's nothing.
Right. Yeah, they are.
It's more about the cold up there than it is about the snow. They can do with multiple feet of snow, but it's the kids waiting outside for school buses when it's negative 10 degrees outside.
Yeah, that's what my wife taught me over the years because she did some stuff in the Boone area. And I'm like, man, there's nothing that's even on the ground. What are they canceling school for? What are they delaying school for? And she said the exact same thing. It's more about the safety of the kids who may not have access to all the warm weather gear that you may need to stay safe in those types
and those buses are cold too. They don't have heat or air conditioner or anything. So,
yeah, that's very true. It's a good point. We did some crazy stuff while we were waiting for buses when we were kids out in the cold weather. So maybe had some figurines, shall we say, that were gotten run over by the bus tires that we strategically placed. we may have ended up in the principal's office for that one. But yeah, it was fun to see them explode. So I will say we did get our enjoyment out of that. Hopefully Zach stayed out of those kinds of trouble as a kid.
Yeah, I was just trying to stay warm out there waiting for the school bus.
Yeah, that's true. We were in Hickory, North Carolina. It was a little different. It's a little bit warmer typically. But anyways, into the Sun Belt hoops action. I called this one surprise at the top because, Zach, I feel like you might be as surprised as I am to see who's at the top of the standings right now, right?
Yeah, big shock.
Yeah.
Especially with how the non-conference went.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's what I'm going to show here in the next graphic, which is the standings as we know them now. Yeah. ODU sitting up there at the top. I mean, technically they're tied with South Alabama at 4-1 apiece. But yeah, as you said, non-con. Look at that 8-9 overall record for our top team in the conference right now. That is, for many reasons, that is not what I expected to see at this point of the season. Zach, you got any thoughts on seeing ODU up there this early or after that start, I guess?
I mean, no. I mean, I'm just kind of surprised to see them up top. Like I saw them beat South Alabama, and then I was like, oh, okay, what are they in conference? Well, like, okay, like maybe they're just having a good start, like good few games. No, they're 4-1, and especially after I watched a few of their non-conference games, and they looked like abysmal. They looked really bad, but they're finally starting to find their groove, which is normal for a first-year head coach. Like later the season goes, the better their team is going to play, just because more time, more use of the system, knowing the players, all that stuff. So,
yeah. So I'm going to jump down and kind of allude to the royal rivalry at that point too. Then, so what's happening with JMU then? Right? I came in thinking they were going to be kind of not necessarily where they were last year. Right? That was a pretty hard mark to attain again. But we thought they'd still be at the top of this conference. And when the conference play first started, they were up there towards the top. I think they were 4-5, something like that after the first two games. Well, now they sit here at 2-3, and not all that different from ODU's overall record at 9-8 overall. Is there a specific thing that maybe is hitting JMU that the background just fell there? Is there a specific thing maybe hitting JMU that ODU has capitalized better on from what you've seen?
I don't know. Maybe it's just like consistency or people stepping up, because in the non-conference we saw Xavier Brown and Bryce Lindsey off the bench come in and consistently give them big buckets and big minutes. And now in the conference, you see Mark Freeman give you 30, and then last game against App State, he gives you 10, and Xavier Brown gives you 0, and then Bryce Lindsey's 1 for 6 off the bench. And then you look at ODU, and guys like Sean Dewar-Gordon and Robert Davis are stepping up on a consistent basis. So maybe it's just consistency of the top guys just stepping up every single night.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's probably better than anything I could have put together. So I like your reasoning there, and we'll see if JMU can also turn it around as ODU has early part of this season. And then let's jump down there. Who's number 2, technically? I guess if you go early season tiebreak, it does favor ODU in the head-to-head, right? Was that the one that we said that they had already gone head-to-head?
Yeah, if they played last game and ODU went to South Alabama and won.
That's right. Okay. But, I mean, how shocking of a victory was that? I mean, obviously going in, they were already 3-1, so it wasn't like they were coming out of the basement. But, I mean, did you think that was going to be a game going in there with where South Alabama had performed outside the conference before conference play started?
Yeah. God, it's back. And then but South Alabama, they beat Arkansas State the game before that. So they were coming in rolling, 4-0 in conference, beating one of the best mid-major teams in the country. And then ODU comes in there and takes them down. So, yeah, that was definitely a shocking one, because I thought that would be a game where South Alabama could kind of handle them, but it turned out not to be the case.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you full-heartedly on that one. After that, we have a logjam of 7 teams with a 3-2 record, which, I mean, really, I guess the only one that's a little bit of a surprise to me is probably Troy. I thought, they might be sitting at more of a 4-1 or possibly even a 5-0 at this point early in the season, but they've dropped a few here lately in their last 3 going just 1-2. But they do have that 10 overall mark, so they're kind of looking good. And I guess Arkansas State also in that exact same realm, 3-2, but 12-5 overall. I mean, Georgia State coming out of the basement. I think the last time we looked at these standings, they were second to last, and now they're up there. I mean, again, there's 7 teams tied with the same record, so it's not a whole lot of gaps at this point. But technically, as we look at this standings, they are up there in 4th as it sits right now. I mean, any big surprises with teams that are 3-2 in either a good way or a bad way?
I would say Louisiana. I don't know about you, but kind of after they fired Bob Marlin, they had a tough start non-conference and fired Bob Marlin. And then, I mean, they started out in conference just fine. I think they're 2-2 in conference with Derek Zimmerman as their head coach. Like, he's doing just fine with this team.
Yeah, I've been really impressed with the job he's done and kind of the turnaround, and it seems to bode well for making the head coaching change, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's still going to be hard. I mean, you're still sitting there at 5-12.
Right.
I mean, it's not like the team's like performing like ODU or South Alabama right now either. So
It's a good point.
I mean, it's so, and I know they probably want a proven head coach or a head coach they can count on for the next few years. And oftentimes with these interim coaches, if they get the full-time job, it's kind of like a 1-year test trial thing. It's like, all right, you had a good half the season. Let's see what you can do for a full year.
Yeah,
and I don't know. I mean, a lot of teams don't really want that. A lot of teams want a head coach that they're comfortable with for multiple years.
Yeah. No, it'll be interesting to see, because if he puts together a very respectable season after a bad start, you've got to think he'll be in the running for the full-time gig. I don't know exactly his whole experience and background to help him land a job like that, but if you can perform well in this conference, again, coming from kind of the literal basement before it started up, that'll be a big-time tool to have in his tool bag when it comes to negotiating for the head coaching job. And Dominic Ambrose stopping by saying, "What's up, fellas? What's up, Dominic? Appreciate you turning into the show, man." We've got two teams at 2-3 with JMU and Texas State. I'm a little surprised by both of them. Both sit at 9-8 exactly overall, too. So kind of mirror images of standings, but also kind of maybe where we thought these teams could be up towards the top more than they currently are now in the standings. And then we've got Coastal, Georgia Southern, both tied at 1-4, both with 8-9 overall records. And then ULM trailing behind that, and last place there, 0-5, just 4-14 overall. So a little bit of an abysmal season there for the Warhawks, unfortunately for their fans. Ben James also jumping in, our resident A-State fan. What's up, Ben? Welcome to the show, man. Appreciate you tuning in. So after that, any last things you want to say on the standings, Zach, before we move on?
I would say I'm a little surprised by both the 1-4 teams, just because I know it was going to be a work in progress with Coastal and Justin Gray his first year, but they look solid in the non-conference. They played outstanding defense, and then I don't know, the wheels are kind of falling off a little bit. Let's see if they can regather themselves. So they play Georgia Southern at home on Thursday, so be a real testament for both these teams.
Yeah, absolutely will. And yeah, I agree. And I'll even throw in Georgia Southern. I think both of us thought they would perform very well this season after how they ended kind of towards last season on a little bit of a run and a little bit more of an upswing with what they brought in recruit-wise and transfer-wise, getting that new arena going up. You just thought there would be a lot of energy and excitement around that team, and it doesn't look to have really transpired. I know they had their leading scorer return just yet?
He returned 2 games ago, but they've lost both games. But okay. maybe it takes them a few games for them to get back into the full swing of things with their full team.
True. Good point. Neil Higgins tuning in. What's up from icy Bostic, North Carolina? App waking up. Yeah, absolutely. They were one of the teams that did not have a great start to the conference slate, but now 3-2 overall. They were pretty good outside of conference, really, before conference. In fact, they were better outside of the conference. And when conference play started, I think they were one of the teams that started 0-2 and have now been on a 3-game run. So, yeah, absolutely. They've been heating up quite a bit. Ben is saying they can't wait. He can't wait for the January 23rd when A-State plays App State. Yes, so that game has been elevated to ESPN2, as most of us know. So it's finally some national TV for some Sunbelt basketball. So we can all appreciate that and tune in for that reason right there. So the next thing what we'll do is jump through each team, again, kind of catch you up from what's been going on over their last 3 games. That's all we've missed since our last episode. We were trying to figure out with Zach and I, like, how to fit an episode in. It's hard with basketball, right? Because you've got, your kind of Wednesday, Thursday games, and then you have Saturday, and you want to put some stuff together between then and then. Do you do that and preview the weekend, or do you just wait for the weekend to go and kind of review all of it and not necessarily touch on going into the next week? It's just kind of basketball is a little tougher than football when you really are going really one day a week, essentially, with mostly Saturday games. But we'll try and figure out a good routine. It probably still won't always be the same day just because of Zach still having school and having some stuff come up. But we appreciate everybody being flexible and still tuning into these as we do go along the way. Neil also saying the Coastal coach was positive and seemed to have have to coach every player. They play inside out with the big fella. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going blank on his name right now. It's something Garden. Your big
Justin
man, Zach.
Gray. Oh, Amenhauser.
Amenhauser. That's it.
Granger as well.
Yeah. The one guy I saw when I was down there with the Campbell game was Amenhauser. So yeah, I think that's probably who he's referring to. That dude is huge. He is a monster on the inside. So definitely be getting the rock to him down low to take advantage of some of those matchups as they go. But here we go. ODU 3-0 in their last 3 games. They took out Southern Miss. That was a close one, just a 3-point game there, 74-71. January 9th, they take out Louisiana in a little bit less of a surprising victory. And then they got that OT win, like you said. Zach, is there any specific game or kind of stat line or player you want to talk about for ODU and what they've been doing over these past 3 games here?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Robert Davis. He's a wing for them. He transferred in from UMass, where he didn't see not much production last year, and then he comes in this year and he's averaging 15 a game. And I mean, this guy's gunning it from 3. He's shooting over 10 threes a game. He was 8 for 20 against South Alabama. This dude just wants to shoot. And I mean, those are the type of players that you enjoy watching. Those guys that have no fear and all confidence, and they just keep gunning it until it goes good for them.
Yeah, very true. I mean, the not surprising statistic here that I will cover, because like I said, Zach's a little bit better with some of those things that you don't see, as some people just look at the stat line and gather something, which is what I did for this part. Sean Durer-Gordon averaging 21 points over these last 3 games, leading the team in those points, but also in rebounds with an 11.3 average over these past 3 games. So kind of their star player, even though, like you said, Davis is one of them as well. So yeah, ODU seems to be kind of firing on all cylinders, and not something we expected to see at this point of the season. Maybe you say it's a little bit closer to a toss-up against Southern Miss in that first one. Definitely would have favored them over Louisiana in that second one. I did not think they would play even all that great necessarily against South Alabama. Like you said, with the hot streak they were coming in with, that one was the most surprising. But obviously being an OT, that bodes well for both teams. Obviously the Jaguars don't want to lose that one, but yeah, having to be beaten OT is something they could still hang their hat on in the early part of the season, I guess. Any last notes on the Monarchs before we move on?
I mean, no. I mean, I think we've covered them good in the start. It's just a big shock.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people were kind of high on them coming in the season, but I kind of ranked them towards the bottom with a new coach and a full new team. But I mean, they're living up to many people's expectations.
Yeah, definitely. They're exceeding mine. I did not think they were going to jump up and be in this spot or position this early in the season. So in number 2 right now, South Alabama. So we just covered that last game that they had on January 11th, that OT loss to ODU. We'll kind of skip over that one. They hammered Georgia Southern 76-47 back on the 4th of January, and then got by, like you said, A-State 76-62 January 9th. I got 3 different players leading the team in points for each one of those games. So John Broome led the team against Georgia Southern, Elijah Ormiston against A-State, and Miles Corey, which is probably the least surprising name out of those 3, leading the team to victory. Not leading the team to victory, but leading the team to that overtime loss against ODU. Anything on the Jags from you, Zach?
Yeah, they've been doing the last few games without a starter and Randy Brady. So, like you said, Ormiston stepped in and he had a career high against Arkansas State. So, it kind of just good to see that a starter that plays good minutes, can get hurt or go down, and somebody else can step in and then not really miss much of a beat.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing that I thought A-State had in their favor was the depth on their roster. And they do have some. Maybe it's not as deep as I had previously thought with kind of the struggle that they've had here recently. But yeah, South Alabama is definitely a deeper team than I would have thought. And that's showing here in this latest little streak of going 2-1. And again, that last one being an overtime loss. So not terribly concerning there. I think the Jaguars can get right back on track after those 3 games. Troy, the next team up, going a 1-2, surprising 1-2, I'd say. They did get that 1-point win over Marshall in that close one, January 4th. They suffered a 1-point loss to Texas State on January 9th. And then they lost one a little bit more than, I don't know. I guess I'm just surprised that they're going 1-2 over these 3 games. The game that they lost against A-State, the least surprising of the losses. The Texas State game was a little bit more of a surprise to me. And maybe the struggle with how close they had to play against Marshall. Is that a little bit of a surprise to you, or you think this is kind of the Troy team that we're going to see throughout the remainder of the season?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a surprise. I think we both thought that this team would be one of the teams to beat in the conference, and they look very beatable right now. But they should have won that Arkansas State game. They were up 13, like in the second half, and I was kind of looked at the score and saw they were up like 11 or 13 or something, and kind of did pay attention to it. I was like, oh, they're going to run away with it. It's at home, double-digit lead, and then all of a sudden I'm on Twitter and I see the final score post. I'm like, what the heck just happened? But, yeah, that's one that they're going to wish they had back.
Yeah, Ben has said he had a note for us on this one. This is also a good note here. A-State held Troy scoreless for the final 6 minutes, and also Kubi Julian came back. Yeah, he'd been missing him a little bit. They had, like I said, they had a deeper bench, and there was a couple games that are there where they were like playing only 3 or 4 guys off the bench instead of the 7 or 8 that they had been getting some minutes. So a little bit of a surprise there as well. Neil also jumping in saying Troy's a little bigger at forward and shoots the ball well. So that's one of the things he saw there in person as they played App State earlier in the season and got that victory over App State, which is helping them stay up there towards the top after going just 1-2 over these past 2 games. And obviously, as we go along here, we will have talked about a lot of these games by the time we get to the final couple of teams. So we won't spend as much time as we go further. But obviously, these teams up near the top have drawn a little bit more interest and should be talked about a little bit more with the success they've had so far on the court. Okay, this one, probably my biggest surprise. And by the way, one last note on Troy before we move on. Tayton Connerway led the team in scoring in all 3 of those games and then had a 3-game average of 22.3. Thomas Dowd led in rebounds with a 7.3 average over those 3 games. So 2 kind of steadfast leaders on the scoreboard and on the boards as well, with Dowd getting that good average over those last 3 games. Okay, Georgia State. This one, I would have never predicted them to be up here showing in 4th again. These 7 teams tied with this same record right now, but Georgia State technically up there in 4th in the standings as we speak. And in a game that I thought would have been a coin toss, a toss-up, Zach, I got to hear your thoughts before we even talk about the other games. 94-70 over the Cajuns. I mean, were you caught off guard by that one?
Yeah, I think that was the Cajuns coming off of a big win in Conway too against Coastal. So I definitely thought at least that game would be close, but they kind of just ran them out the building.
Yeah, they definitely did. I did not see a 94-point outburst coming from the Panthers with what they had done leading up to that point. I mean, to have them beat the Cajuns is one thing, but by 24 points when the buzzer hit is the more surprising thing. And then they got a tight battle against their big rival there in Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern, obviously typically doesn't think that they're as much of a rival, but I'd say in basketball that exists a little bit more because of Georgia State's prowess over the past few years with some Sun Belt recognition and NCAA tournament appearances. They get by the Eagles in overtime, 82-78. So again, that one went real tight. And then Zach, the 79-74 victory over Coastal. What can you tell us about that one there?
Yeah, Coastal should have won this game by a lot, but they got out to a hot start. I think they had like 22 points in the first 5 minutes. Coastal did. It was like 22-6. Coastal had like a 13-point lead at halftime. They were 10 for 17 from 3. And then second half, Georgia State couldn't miss and Coastal couldn't make it. I don't think they hit another three for the rest of the game. So, yeah, I guess sometimes that's just how it goes. And Zareek Nutter was bullying people, especially in the post. Like, this is a guy who's, I mean, he's not the biggest guy, 6'7", 210. So he's not like a center. But
Right.
anybody you put on him, he was just putting him in the post and giving him work, and then he could not miss with his little jump hook. So, yeah, I mean, that's one that they probably should have lost, but they snuck out with a win.
Makes sense. That was the guy I had circled because Zareek Nutter led the team over these 3 games with an average of 15 points per game. And he did that even with missing the Louisiana game. So he led the team after just 2 games of actual playing time and going for over 20 points in each one of those other games to lead the team overall in the 3-game stretch there. So definitely the headliner when it comes to talking about the Georgia State Panthers. And
they're not deep either. I mean,
no.
Clash Peters was out against Coastal. He was in a sling. I don't know how long he's gonna be out, but without him, they're 7 deep. They play 7 guys, and one of those guys played 10 minutes. So
Wow.
I mean, 6 guys are getting almost all their minutes, which makes it a little bit more impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know another team in the conference that's doing that. I remember seeing that earlier this year too. I was like, is there a bunch of guys hurt for them or what's going on? Because like you said, a lot of these other teams have 5, 6, 7 guys that are showing minutes off the bench, even if it's just 2 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever. But Georgia State, like you said, they've got like 2 or 3 guys listed for their entire bench getting into the game. So yeah, absolutely. Georgia State pulling some magic out of their hat in this early part of the season so far. And we'll see if the depth concern, is worrisome going forward, because you got to think that takes its toll on you after you go through the season, but maybe it bodes well for the chemistry, keeping most of the core guys together for longer stretches of time, I guess. And it seems to be paying off so far, right?
I mean, yeah, like you said, it might be better just because those are the 6 best guys. Like, why would you want to take them off the court? But at the same time, all these guys playing 30 minutes a night, I mean, eventually, especially in conference play where it's physical, I mean, towards the end of the season, it might wear down on them.
Yeah, good point. We'll have to see what transpires there. Okay, A-State, the team that we thought would be on top, the team that started the season on top, big outside of conference victory, and here they sit, technically in 5th place as we look at them now. They suffered a loss to JMU, 67-62 on the 4th. They suffered another loss, South Alabama. We've already kind of talked about that one. And then they got back on the winning track against Troy in that 84-78 victory. So going just 1-2 over this 3-game stretch. Did they just get caught at the right time by the Dukes and the Jags? I mean, I guess we've already talked about the Jaguars. They're a phenomenal team as it looks so far. So that one may be the least surprising of the results. JMU, not towards the top of this conference right now, though, losing by 5 to them. What thoughts did you have on that January 4th matchup?
I mean, I don't really know what to think of Arkansas State right now. I mean, they kind of look like the same team they have this whole season. I'm not really sure what it is that's made them beatable and look beatable now. I mean, Hodgson's a great coach and a great recruiter, but sometimes I question his rotations just because, I mean, sometimes, like, for example, like Josh Hill came in against Coastal and like couldn't miss, had like 20 something points. And then like a game later, he barely plays. And then like Darian Ford started last game and then plays 12 minutes. Like, I'm not quite sure what to think about it. I'd have to ask him or maybe just look into it more, like why he runs his rotations like that. But maybe that's just because you have so many, like we said, they're really deep. So maybe that's just, you have so many guys that you just want to try to get as many on the court as possible. And then you just ride the hot hands.
Yeah. I have to wonder sometimes, maybe this isn't happening with A-State or anybody specifically, but I wonder if there's a certain section of coaches that understand yes, you need to do well during the regular season, but I'm not worried about a loss here or there because I'd rather be where I've experienced a certain set of lineups and the chemistry that could come from that match on the court at that time, knowing full well that I can get this team heated up and going in the right direction at the end. Because really, as we know, I mean, the Sun Belt has historically been a one-bid league. And with the way the standings are already kind of chopping up, I feel like that's the way we're going again this year. But yeah,
it's not even a question this year.
Yeah. The thought process for me is like, I don't even care that much about the regular season. I mean, we saw what App State did last year. They win the regular season championship and they don't even reach the Sun Belt championship for the postseason, the conference tournament. And then they don't get, they're not a bubble team necessarily. I mean, they were technically a bubble team, but not one of the top bubble teams. And I don't think a lot of people had them in the field of 68. But I mean, if I'm a coach, I'm worried about I just want to play competitively, obviously win more than lose. That's, the obvious portion here. But, I'm not worried about a close loss to a good team as, they suffered against the Jags of South Alabama. As long as you're performing well in that game, that's what I'm caring about. And knowing that, hey, we'd match up against them next time. I'm confident and comfortable we can beat them. And maybe nobody really spells it out like that, but I'm wondering if people care so much that, a little loss here or there. Not saying they like it. Don't get me wrong. Just saying, hey, that was a 5-point game, a 3-point game, an overtime game. We're right there. We're right there where we need to be. Maybe we're missing a guy. Maybe one guy was off shooting a little bit. Maybe they just had a guy who couldn't miss, and that's not going to happen again in the next matchup. It's just interesting to see maybe some thoughts or perspectives across the coaching spectrum on what they maybe thought about that. Ben was saying that they struggled pretty good against JMU early on. Maybe the thing to point at that too. Go ahead.
Maybe, like you said, maybe just like testing out different lineups against different styles of play, just so you're ready for like what rotation to throw out against what team in the postseason. But and with the new conference tournament, every loss is even more valuable now.
True.
Like you're going to be playing every single day.
That's true. Yeah, you don't want to be at the bottom of that thing. It'll be exciting if someone can actually run the gauntlet. My concern with that tournament setup is that if you don't get a team that gets kind of deep there a little bit, then not that you won't have your best team in the end. That's probably more likely that you have some of your best teams at the end, right? Because they're avoiding some of that early stuff. By the time they're playing some of these weaker teams or lower seeded teams, those guys are a little bit more worn out. I guess the argument could be made they're a little hotter too, right? They've been playing more. So they're gelling.
Maybe like a 7 or an 8 seed in this style of conference tournament, where like you're not playing every day for a week, but you're playing like 3 or 4 days in a row, and you can kind of get a rhythm and get hot. But yeah, I don't really see like someone towards the bottom of the 13th or 14th or 12th or 11th. They might win a couple games, but I don't see them going all the way just because they're going to have to play every day for 6-7 days.
Yeah. It looks cool and crazy, and it's gotten a lot of publicity. We'll cover that as it gets a little closer when we start getting to the point where does it look like someone's going to end up? We're way too early in the season for that kind of look now. Ben is asking for a thought on the second round of the MAC Sunbelt Challenge, which was matchups were officially released today. If you're watching this live, and maybe yesterday or the day after, if you're watching or listening on the audio version of this podcast, but we won't share those now. I mean, we just got those. I did a once over. I know Zach also reposted and looked at the matchups as well. We'll probably get a little bit closer to those games before we really preview those. Maybe do a little team up with a MAC podcast. I've already reached out, so hopefully we can have some good news on that. I know we have some other people that we've reached out to, and hopefully we'll get on in the future as well for some guests for this basketball podcast. So we will share those thoughts for now. And Ben is noting that the Red Wolves knocked out App State in the basketball tournament last year for the Sun Belt. Yeah, I did not like that matchup going in. A team that could shoot really well from three, didn't have a ton of those last year. And if you get a team like that gets hot, which the Red Wolves did, they brought App State's tournament to an end in there. We'll get to Neil's note, and then we'll move on to the next team. Neil says, you want to be in the upper portion of the conference. Then, like you say, is to win the conference tournament to get the bid. Yeah. Conference tournament is the bigger focal point, right? I mean, like I said, App State wins the conference last year. As we know, the NIT used to take those winners no matter what happened in the postseason, and you were assured an NIT spot. Now that is gone away as well. Now, App State did still get into the NIT, but yeah,
we gotta hope they don't do that for the NCAA tournament now too, because it sounds like the Power 5 conferences want to try to get a hold of that too.
Shocker. Shocked that they want more control and more money for their teams. That's just what we need, right? I mean, I think the allure and the desire, excitement to tune in and watch a lot of these early round games is because of the mid-major aspect. I mean, you got Syracuse versus Duke in the first round. Yeah, that's a big game in most years. But, I mean, is that really drawing in the people that want to see a major upset? Because even if one's a higher seed than a lower seed, they're both coming from power conferences. That doesn't get me as amped up as seeing a Wright State versus Duke, where you got a bigger underdog typically than what you're going to see. And we know how Duke has struggled in those early rounds over some years. So those are the matchups that I think more people want to see and hope to see when they're doing stuff like that. So, Red Wolves haven't been to the big dance since 1999. So it would be huge for them to come out on top of the conference as they were predicted to do. We'll see if they can turn around a little bit. There's a little struggle here lately. Neil thinks that App State should have played their NIT game in Boone against Wake Forest. Unfortunately, they had to go on the road, and maybe that's what did them in. He did say that they earned that, and yeah, I agree. If you're going to put that in, you're giving it to Wake because they're the power team and probably bring in more people, more money. But yeah, it would be nice to reward a better regular season from a mid-major team than reward a power conference team with, don't struggle with the money over there at Wake Forest and the private school. But anyway, back to the Sun Belt at hand, specifically Southern Miss going, let's see, what did they go here? 2-1 overall over these last 3 games. They lost that first one to ODU, as we've talked about previously. They go on to beat ULM pretty comfortably, and then they get by Texas State in OT. What do you think about that out-of-bounds play, Zach, where I don't know exactly who it was? You know who it was who threw the ball and who got hit?
That was Mark Drone who threw the ball. It was a second game back who's actually been really good for Texas State, but we'll talk about him later.
Yeah.
It was definitely dirty. I mean, I don't know how he didn't call anything on that.
Seeing the replay shocked me. Seeing it live maybe somehow changed my thought. Maybe that's what the refs saw. But, man, seeing that on Twitter on a replay, he obviously player for Southern Miss down on the ground, kind of done with the play. As someone else alluded to, he's completely now stepped out of bounds, grabs the ball, and then chucks it directly at the play. And come on, let's be honest. He could have thrown it at his legs area, right? He threw it at his head on purpose and smashed him right in the face with it. I mean, I don't know how you defend it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can see how the Texas State player is going to defend it. Like, he's probably going to say, like, if he ever gets confronted for it, like, oh, he was just trying to save the ball, because he made it look like he was kind of trying to save the ball, even though he was standing clear out of bounds.
Right.
He kind of like jumped up and like quickly let go of the ball, like he was like trying to save it or something. But yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. The one thing that I've always said, and for people that have listened to this show across the spectrum, I've done a little officiating in my day, not football, not basketball, and never baseball, but I've done some soccer stuff. And the one tell that I always saw when a player did anything purposeful was to not look back. And if you notice after that play, he does not look back. He knew he hit him in the face, and he just turns and walks away. And what I've seen is if someone really doesn't intentionally do something like that, they're immediately like, oh, snap, I kind of hurt you. Or like, oh, they freeze because they realize what they had done. When you do it with intent and you know you did it with intent, you typically do what you're going to do and then you turn away and go. You're like, yep, I knew I hit him. I don't need to look. And that's exactly what the response was there. So that's to me the tell of whether it was purposeful or intentful. And that's what I saw out of that player at that moment. So to me, a little bit dirty. Should have been dealt with in the moment a little bit more. Have we heard if he's gotten a suspension out of that play or anything?
No, I haven't heard anything about it.
Okay. Interesting. I'm surprised after the replay that they maybe didn't come down with something.
I doubt something happens. I doubt something happens just because, I mean, nothing happened in the game, so they'll probably just move on with it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say for the players, if they're not paying full attention to maybe how far or how late after the whistle that kind of happened or whatnot, maybe they didn't even realize how it
looked
until after the fact, maybe.
Yeah, I also think like the Southern Miss players, like you see that happen, like to one of your teammates. I feel like a lot of the times you like go and confront them, or there's like a big, huge like scuffle or whatever. But I mean, nothing happened. Like both teams just went back to the huddle and just kept talking. So maybe that had something to do with it too, just like not getting called, because a lot of the times the refs don't see something like that, but they end up going look back on it just because that happens to be like a big, huge fight or some pushing back and forth or some technicals because of some talking or whatever the case may be. So they go back and look on it and see, oh, that happened too. But none of that happened. So,
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, there was. You're right. There was nothing that drew extra attention to it in that moment.
Which shocked me. Usually,
yeah.
I mean, especially college athletes, like something happens like that, and they want to like start a confrontation. Like a lot of the times, especially I know not really basketball, but mainly football. Like they're looking for any reason to start a confrontation.
Yeah,
and like it kind of did surprise me that literally nothing happened after. And I think at least I don't know who it was, but in the replay, at least one person saw that happen. I watched him. He kind of looked at the Texas State player like, what the heck are you doing? And then looked back away. But
yeah. And with how physical of a team Southern Miss typically is and has been over the past few seasons, there's been a couple games. I think there was, I've noted this, like last year, there was at least 2 players who came away with like bloody faces after some altercations, not necessarily because of like a punch or anything like that, but just physical hard play where they got fouled a little bit or took a elbow or forearm to the face type of thing. But yeah, with the pedigree of what Southern Miss has put on the floor, with the physicality, not being afraid of it and maybe matching that intensity. Yeah, I'm definitely like you, surprised and shocked that no kind of retaliation, even later in the game or anything like that, didn't seem to kind of take place there. And it looked like they, just like South Alabama, had 3 different leaders in these 3 games for points. Curbelo, who's back for Southern Miss and playing pretty well overall. Harris, who's been pretty consistent for them this year, and Worrell Jr. led the 3 games independently. And then Harris was one of the better guys on the boards, as he has been all season long. So his return to Southern Miss being a good one thus far for them. Jumping over to the Cajuns of Louisiana. As we mentioned, we talked about that 20-point drubbing they suffered at the hands of Georgia State. Then they go down to ODU, who's, as we've mentioned, been a little bit of a surprise, by 11 on January 9th. They get back on the board. Probably at this point, though, I'm thinking that game against ULM's closer than I would have thought going in, with how the Cajun had kind of turned a little bit of a corner. I don't think they're full tilt a different team necessarily, but they had a little bit of a streak there. And then they struggled to get that win over the Warhawks of ULM, 71-68. Any more notes on the Cajuns over those 3 games, or just in general?
Yeah, I mean, you said the ULM game was closer than you thought. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an in-state rivalry. Like, most of those games are close, no matter how good and how bad the 2 teams are. So maybe that's just the reason why that game was so close. Just a little something extra to get up for ULM.
Yeah, that's a good point. Definitely probably sparking the Warhawks to try a little bit more to get that victory, because they've struggled to get any, really. Only 4 victories overall. Not 4 conference victories, as some of the teams in our conference have. 4 victories overall on the season as a total. So definitely a struggle, and we'll touch on them last. It looks like, yet again, another team that had 3 different scorers lead them in each game. But what would we say we're going with for is it not Mustafa, but
yeah, Mustafa.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Mustafa is leading the team in rebounds, which is not surprising at all. He's averaging over 6 a game. So pretty good average there and keeping them competitive on the glass. I think that about does it for the Cajuns. Again, as we go along, we'll have talked about a lot of these matchups already. I guess I'll check with you, Zach, though. Any last notes on the Cajuns before we move on to App State?
Nope. So we got
gotcha. All right. So App State did not start conference play very well, going 0-2 to start the season, but they have heated up here, 3-0 in these last 3 games. That first victory, 72-61 over Texas State. They get by Coastal Carolina. This one, a little bit of a surprise to me with the scoring outburst of 74 in that one compared to Coastal's just 51 points. And then they really, again, surprised me yet again with a matchup that was close every time last season with James Madison winning this one by 20 points on the 11th of January, 86-66. So what do you think of the Mountaineers? You think they're turning the corner for good? You think they're just on a little bit of a heater? I mean, you probably watched a little bit of that Coastal game at least, right?
As long as CJ Huntley can keep playing the way he's playing. I mean, that guy's on fire. He can't miss, especially from 3. Like, I remember watching the Coastal game, and they said, like, it was like his career high in threes or something.
Yeah.
Or points and threes or something like that. And then the JMU game, it just kept going. So I think as long as he's good, Miles Tate is still been good. They've had Alonzo Dodd has come in to starting lineup now and been really good for them. They've gotten some good contributions off the bench. So I think as long as CJ Huntley can, obviously he's going to cool down a little bit, but as long as he can stay good, and then Miles Tate obviously as well. I think that, yeah, they'll be fine.
Yeah, it's no surprise that when Huntley has good games, they're typically winning most of those matchups. I mean, sans maybe like the Wisconsin game when he was the high scorer, but they didn't win. That one was always going to be a little tough. But most of the others where he's been the leading scorer, they've been really competitive, if not winning the game. He goes for 21 in each of those last 2 games there against Coastal and James Madison, and has been their leading rebounder in all 3 games. So no surprise that one of the bigger guys who ends up shooting the 3 really well, surprisingly well, as Zach said, over these past few games at least, when he's hot, this team is pretty good, and they've needed him to step up. That was one of the guys that when I did the solo show last week, I said they have to have more out of Huntley if they want to be a good team. And like we said here, that is exactly what's happening at the right time for the Mountaineers as they continue a little bit of a hot streak there to turn the corner in conference play early. Okay, the Marshall Thundering Herd going 3-0 as well in this early part of the season, getting a 1-point victory over Troy, as we've mentioned, a 2-point victory over the Dukes of JMU, and last but not least, a comfortable victory over the Georgia Southern Eagles. Thoughts on the Thundering Herd and this streak that they've also put together? Both them and App State kind of neck and neck trying to come up from the bottom of the standings right now.
Yeah, they've been really good as of late. A guy I wrote down was Jalen Spear. There's a guy transferred from Florida A&M that put up a lot of points there and kind of started the season injured and then kind of struggled. But lately he's been on fire. He's been really good for them. It's kind of the scoring they needed, especially with Obina and Achille Killen. He was out last game, but at least last few games he wasn't producing at least to the level we maybe expected. Same thing with Nate Martin. He's kind of having a down year, especially to what we thought he was going to do this year. So they needed somebody to step up. Michael Dawson's been really good for them, but they needed another guy to step up, and Jalen Spears has been really big for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mingo showing up a little bit there too as well. Not necessarily as a top scorer, but contributing in some other aspects. And I do want to correct myself here and correct the graphic as you're seeing on screen. That should be flipped. Marshall is only 2-1 out of these last 3 games, not 3-0.
Yeah,
they
lost
did
Troy.
Drop that. Yeah, they dropped that Troy game 58-57. They did not win that game. So that was my mistake for flipping those 2 scores there and not double checking myself a little bit better. Neil was talking about App playing 3 smalls. Yeah, a lot of these teams will be playing a little bit more of small ball across the board as a conference, just because, unfortunately, bringing in talented 7-footers is not so easy for the smaller major programs. But you do see some of that. So we've got some guys in conference that will cause some disruption, and we'll see if Nate Barton can step it up with the Herd and continue them to write their season off. James Madison Dukes. They're doing pretty well over these last couple games, except for that game against App State and Marshall, as we just talked about. So they got that victory over A-State, and then if going on a 2-game losing streak, is this kind of concerning? Do you think this is kind of going the opposite way of ODU, or do you think the James Madison Dukes will get it together here?
I mean, I think we talked about it a little at the beginning. Like, they just need some consistent guys to step up on a game-to-game basis. Beginning of the season, that was Xavier Brown, and now he's kind of cooled off. And Bryce Lindsey, at the beginning of season 2, he's cooled off for the most part. And then Mark Freeman has just been inconsistent. He's given you some really good games, but then he has games where I think last game he was 3 for 12 with 10 points or something like that. So, they just need guys to step up for them every game.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm seeing too. I mean, you could go down the list, and I think the last 6 games or so, there's almost a different leading scorer in each one of them. Ricks has been pretty consistent on the glass, but yeah, I agree with you. It just has to be more consistent from their top guys. Otherwise, you're getting results that are kind of sporadic all over the place. You beat a team like A-State, drop a game like the Marshall one. Not a bad loss, only 2 points, but yeah, I mean that's a game probably before the season starts that you circled as a win in all likelihood. At least I probably would have. And then the game against App State, probably before the season, was a toss-up maybe, or you actually lean towards JMU even, and then you lose that one by 20 points. That's a little bit of a surprise to me there that they weren't more competitive in that game. It started off close in that one specifically, but yeah, they couldn't hang with them after a while. And like you said, a lot of that due to Huntley and how he's been shooting the ball. But interesting there for the Dukes of JMU. All right, Texas State here going 1-2 in their last 3 games. Again, talked about that early one against App State. They lose 72-61. Rebound with that. I guess the victory over Troy is kind of the more surprising thing, that they suffer that overtime loss to Southern Miss 92-88, but they get that 1-point victory over the Trojans. Is that maybe the most surprising result out of the 3, or you got something else to pick?
I mean, yeah, they definitely should have. That Southern Miss game shouldn't have been in overtime at all. I think Southern Miss's biggest lead was 20+, and that was another game where I looked at the scores and they were just beating the crap out of them. So I kind of just stopped paying attention. And then next thing I know, I checked the scores again, and there's a few seconds left, and they're about to head to overtime. So, I think Christian Turner, their starting center, has been out, especially the last few games. They're really missing him because they're having to pretty much just go with 5 guards, and then they bring a big or 2 off the bench. But Mark Drone as well. I mean, that's a guy. I think we talked about him earlier with him throwing the ball up the guy's face, but as a JUCO transfer who the staff was super high on at the beginning of the year, and he's just been injured. And the last 2, he came back. He's played the last 2 games, and he's averaging 23.5 a game. So he's been really big for them.
Yeah, that last game there, 30-point outburst. Aided a little bit with the overtime, but still, there's not a whole lot of guys in this league putting up 30 points. So, pretty big game there. Morgan, Gums been pretty good, and O'Garo, like you said too, mentioning his name. Texas State's got some pretty good talent on their squad, so to see them win a few more games here soon would not surprise me in the least. Definitely a team that, if they heat up towards the end of the season, as we talked about earlier with the way that conference tournament is set up, not a team you'd probably want to run into, but we'll see how they continue on. All right, Coastal Carolina. They were just 1-2 in their last couple games, and that one victory came pretty easily against ULM. before suffering those losses that we've mentioned to App State and Georgia State. Zach, you're the resident Coastal expert. I'll let you take it early from here and just tell us, thoughts, comments, concerns on your Chanticleers down there in Conway.
I mean, like you said, or like I said earlier, it's first year with a new coach, completely new team, and beginning of the year they were one of the even the top teams in the country in defense, and then they're kind of losing their identity a little bit. It's kind of and just like beginning of the season, they're still struggling to score. So if you're still struggling to score and not playing as good defense, I mean, it's not a recipe for success. So they just need, and then they need to shoot consistently. Just because Rasheed Jones was 2 for 10 in the App State game, they struggled in the first half, and especially the first part of the first half, and that's what really got them behind, and they just couldn't recover. And then the Georgia State game, they come out guns blazing, shoot 10 for 17 in the first half, I think like 25 points in the first 6 minutes, and then they don't hit a single three in the second half and blow that game. So they just need at least like one or two guys just to shoot on a consistent basis, game in, game out, like good.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Their starting point guard, D.A. Houston, he's still out. That's a guy – I was talking with somebody a few days ago. Like, if it was me, I would probably just redshirt him at this point. I mean, what is it? Over 2 months into the season, you got a month and a half left. This is his last year of eligibility. Like, why waste his last year of eligibility playing 10 games, 15 games, or whatever the case is? And, I mean, yeah, maybe he might help you win a few games here and there. But, I mean, that was a guy, I think Trevor in the chat, one of the earlier episodes, said, like, that's a guy that Coastal shouldn't even bother picking up because he played a lot of minutes for a really good team that went to the tournament last year.
Yeah.
I mean, no, he didn't put up the best stats, but he was 30-plus minutes a game, and he definitely could have went to a better school. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back, but at the same time, if it was me, they redshirted McVicker, might as well just redshirt him and just go all in for next year because they have 3 really good recruits coming in next year. You're going to have McVicker back, Houston, and then if you bring him in, 5th-year experienced point guard, just at this point of the season, I would just probably shut it down.
Yeah. Is there a time that he has to have that done by?
I think as long as he does that before, like, pretty much before the next season, pretty much, or before the next school year, pretty much.
Gotcha.
Yeah, if you play under 10 games and you're hurt, you qualify for a medical redshirt. He's played 1 game. He came back 1 game, got hurt. So yeah, I mean, probably. Yeah, if it was like I said, if it was me, I'd just shut it down.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you at all on that. It sounds like a thing to do, especially like you said, a younger coach who needs the experience with a roster, but lean heavily into next season with how this one started off.
I also, there's that new rule. I don't know if you saw it. There's a new rule that the NCAA is probably going to pass this offseason where everyone gets 5 years.
Yes.
If that, I don't know, this hasn't been confirmed or not, but from my understanding, like, it doesn't matter if you medical redshirt, you redshirt, any of that stuff. It's just 5 years no matter what. So I wonder if that plays into, like, them bringing back D.A. Houston. Like, I wonder if they don't redshirt him and bring him back for the last 10 to 15 games just because at the end of the year, this will be, like, you can't bring him back next year if this rule passes just because, like I said, it's 5 years no matter what. It's a hard cap on 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
it'd be interesting to see.
You might have to bring him back.
It's a good point. And honestly, it could be one of those things where they bring him back, he plays, and then they find a little bit of a loophole somehow to still get him that 5th year.
Maybe.
I don't know, but I mean, we've just seen it with some of those JUCO guys in football, right? Like, they've exhausted everything of eligibility, but all of a sudden, well, now they found another year somehow, which is
Well, yeah, that's because Diego Pavia sued the NCAA.
yeah. Well, now they've just created a storm, if you will.
And now John Wade of Southern Miss is suing the NCAA for pretty much the same thing.
Really?
Yeah, he's suing the NCAA because I think they're counting a year of eligibility that in a year in which he didn't play at all. But I don't think from my understanding, they didn't submit the papers for him redshirting, but he didn't play at all. So they're counting that year just because he didn't submit the papers that he redshirted. But he's arguing that he didn't play.
Right.
So he's suing the NCAA for similar thing that Diego Pavia did, which is antitrust laws or whatever. So, yeah, I wonder how that goes, and then I wonder how the 5-year rule, if that gets passed, how does that affect him?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's all interesting, man. It feels like some of these kids are going to be in school for 6, 7.
I mean,
8
yeah,
years
I saw one where like you go to JUCO for 2 years.
Yep.
And then you can be in the NCAA for 5 years, and then you go pro at the age of like 26?
Yeah. You go
if
pro.
If all these rules pass, but
yeah, you go pro. You have your doctorate. You're set for life.
No, I saw one. No, I saw one. It's like you graduate high school at 18, and then you go to a post grad year, 19, and then you go 2 years to JUCO, and then you can go 5 years to NCAA, which would be absolutely absurd.
It will be, but the good thing with this, I think, is that most people aren't going to prefer to go that route, right? Like, I don't want to go spend 2 years in JUCO. I mean, I'm sure there's some good JUCOs out there and all this stuff, but JUCOs are typically for, hey, like my game's not where I want it, or B, my grades aren't where they need to be. So I'm hoping that the JUCO stuff is mainly for those ones who struggle with maturity or getting a consistent baseline study habit down so that they can be successful when they go to a bigger school.
That's still going to be prominent especially in a mid-major conference like the Sun Belt, where we see a bunch of JUCO transfers.
Yes, that is a good point. And we've had a bunch of JUCO transfers from that Mississippi, Southern Alabama area. So yeah, we've got a nice thing going with those guys, because some of those guys have come in and performed very well. So we don't want to take away from that, especially because we know and we've seen, right, that our best players are typically being stolen by the bigger programs after one good year here in the belt. So we need to funnel from somewhere else as well. And if that has to be the JUCO route, I think we're all for it, right? Like, I don't want to see our conference continually get picked apart and not have something to replenish the talent that we're losing on the court. So hopefully, yeah, those things bode well in the end, even though it's kind of ugly to kind of sort it out and get to the point you want. Okay, Georgia Southern, not so great in their last few games, going 0-3 here. They got absolutely hammered by South Alabama 76-47, as we touched on in that one. They lose in OT to Georgia State 82-78. They also lose to Marshall. This one probably bigger scoring difference than I would have predicted, with Marshall winning this one 81-69. I know we kind of touched on them a little bit. Any further notes on Georgia Southern, either over these 3 games or just in general?
No, I think I pretty much touched base on what I want to say at the beginning. Like, Dante Holloman was out for a while, and he's finally come back. Maybe it just takes a few games to get their groove back in. They've also been another team that's been tinkering with lineups. Bunch of different starting lineups, new guys getting new minutes. So it'll be interesting to see how they go forward with it.
Yeah, they're another one of those teams that has a lot of different high scores for the season thus far. You're not seeing necessarily the same two names a lot like you do with most of the other teams. So yeah, I agree with you. They just need to find something more consistent all around, really. I don't know. It's not just one player being more consistent. It's all of them kind of being more consistent so that they could put it all together at the same time on the floor. That's obviously very simplistic thought process, but I don't know what else you say after a team that's struggled, right?
Even when we say consistent, that can be like a consistently bad, just so like you can get out the rotation and open up minutes for guys that have been consistently better. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
find consistency in general. Like,
Yes.
kind of hurts when you're playing like 2 minutes one game and then 20 minutes the next game, and then one guy's playing 10 minutes one game, 30 minutes the next game. Just find like some consistency.
Yeah. And another team that's really in that same boat there, and we'll finish up with ULM before we touch on Zach's latest power rankings that he just released, and we'll share again on X after this is over. But ULM Warhawks also 0-3 after their last 3 games, suffering losses to Coastal Carolina, Southern Miss, and Louisiana. And again, with them being the last team, we've touched on each and every one of these games. I mean, they've got Young and Bolden who've kind of been leading that team for the most part. I don't know if there's a whole lot more to say of a team that's only got 4 wins and is currently really on a 7-game losing streak. I mean, I don't know if it gets any better when you've got Troy next up on your schedule, right?
Yeah, it's definitely not going well. Keith Richard retiring at the end of the year. Yeah, it's not fun to watch.
No, not fun to watch at all. Their last win over Arkansas Pine Bluff, so nothing to even hang their hat on. Most of their victories actually over Division II or NAIA schools in general. 2 of those just being those D1 Northwestern State and Arkansas Pine Bluff. So not a season. My surprise pick to surprise people was not a good one. Picking ULM to do so was not a chance that I should have taken. But oh well, you take some chances sometimes. Zach, let's move on to your power rankings. I'll pull them up. I don't have that graphic in front of us for the show as you're watching live, but we will go over it and see where you've got some teams sitting in this thing.
Yeah, so number 1, moving up 2 spots is South Alabama. I know they lost to Old Dominion, but I mean they've been really good and they knocked off Arkansas State, so can't have them behind Arkansas State now. So only thing you can do is move them in front of them. Arkansas State moves down 1 spot just with the jump from South Alabama. Troy also moves down 1 spot. I know they lost 2 games, but they were both Texas State and Arkansas State, and they were both really close games. So, yeah, it's not much to hang your hat on. Or they're not bad losses, I should say. App State moves up 2 spots with 2 blowout wins over Coastal and JMU. I have Texas State staying at 5. Yeah, they knock off Troy, and then they lose a close one in a game where they really shouldn't have been competitive in at Southern Miss. Marshall jumps at 2 spots with two wins. They're finally finding their feet, like we said. JMU, I have them falling 3 spots, just 2 losses, and then a blowout loss to App State in which they just didn't look good at all. So moving them down. Old Dominion's a big jumper. I know they're at the top of the conference standings, but with the non-conference stuff like that, they've kind of been towards the bottom of my rankings, but they're slowly moving their way up. So this is a big week for them, beating South Alabama. So they jumped up 3 spots. Southern Miss, 2 wins, blowing out ULM, which they should do, and then beating Texas State, but they stayed in the same spot just because Old Dominion's a big jumper in the rankings. Georgia State, they're another big jumper for me, beating Georgia Southern and Coastal. Georgia Southern falls 4 spots. My biggest faller. Yeah, like we've said, they're just not consistent enough. They haven't looked good, and they got 2 losses this week. Coastal falls 2 spots. I almost had them falling 3, but just because they've lost the head-to-head to Louisiana, but I still think they're a better team than Louisiana. They should have won that game. So, and then Louisiana 13 beating, and at the same time beating ULM. Like they lost to ODU and beat ULM for Louisiana. So that really isn't much for me to move them up too much, at least. And then, of course, ULM 14.
Yeah, not much to say about the 4-team or the 4-game wins the 4 wins out of conference before conference play started, like we said. So a little bit of a concerning aspect there for the Warhawks. All right, Zach, that kind of wraps up as we want to talk about. Is there anything note-wise or newsworthy that you want to cover before we get out of here and say goodbye to the good people?
I mean, no, I think we covered all. I think the two main things the main thing that I was going to talk about was just the 5 years of eligibility thing, but we got to that. So,
yeah, absolutely. We've got games coming up. Is everyone playing Wednesday, or we have a little bit of a split between Wednesday and Thursday this week?
Well, I know Coastal plays Thursday, so I would assume there's probably a game or two on Wednesday, and then most of the games on Thursday, like usual.
Gotcha. Yep. And then
Saturday
matchups.
Yeah, Saturday. So they play Sunbelts. Yeah, there's 3 games on Wednesday, 4 games Thursday, and then everybody Saturday, it looks like.
Gotcha. All right. Well, be on the lookout for that. We will try and keep you up on the social networks with some score updates and some stuff we've shared from other accounts for basketball. So until next time, we will see you guys later. We appreciate you all tuning in and following along with the basketball.